Hi, my name is Lokesh and I'm the founder of LetsBloom, a venture backed by Standard Chartered Ventures. Did you know that organizations across the world will be spending $400 billion this year on cloud computing and cloud platforms? The spend will grow at a compounded rate of 15% per annum over the next 7 years. Now let us focus on organizations operating in regulated industries such as financial services, healthcare, and government. These organizations are expected to spend around 150 to 200 billion this year for onboarding and running both legacy and new applications to cloud platforms such as AWS, Microsoft Azure, GCP, and Alibaba Cloud. If you are operating in a regulated industry, you would have experienced that building, testing, and deploying cloud-based applications is complex, slow, and expensive. By using the LetsBloom platform and marketplace, you can securely onboard your applications to the cloud quickly and securely co-create with third parties at a fast pace. What you did in months and years can now be done in days and weeks on the LetsBloom platform, up to 10 times faster at a fraction of the cost. We have two offerings. Our first offering is the LetsBloom platform as a service, which provides secure onboarding of applications to any cloud platform in a regulated industry. Our platform includes pre-built bank-grade security, compliance controls, CI/CD, and we offer a fully managed service across the application lifecycle from development to production. Our second offering is the LetsBloom marketplace that allows our clients to use LetsBloom certified third-party apps instantly in a safe and secure manner. The security and compliance posture of all these third-party apps on the LetsBloom marketplace is available at the click of a button. We help organizations, including independent software vendors, to accelerate revenue growth by selling to new enterprise clients through LetsBloom. If you operate in a regulated industry, are on a cloud adoption journey, or want to create better experiences for your clients, I welcome you to try the LetsBloom platform and marketplace.
Today we'll be looking at Bloom through the experience of three main user personas. Using the subway map as a reference, we will begin with a venture owner requesting and receiving an invitation to Bloom. Then we will follow them through venture onboarding, following the developer through this user journey of onboarding an application, and then we'll switch gears a bit and look at the CTO persona reviewing the security posture of their application. For this first user journey, we will follow a venture owner requesting and receiving an invitation to Bloom, and then continue through the Bloom onboarding process. So this request form allows users to complete instant self-service onboarding. So we'll go ahead and enter the relevant details. So immediately we receive a confirmation email, and then shortly thereafter, we'll receive an email inviting us to complete the identity verification process. So identity verification is central to Bloom's onboarding process. So now that the identity has been validated, we can receive and accept the invitation to the Bloom platform. We'll complete our registration by creating a password and security question, accepting the terms and conditions, and creating the account. So our sandbox cloud environment has now been created with Bloom security controls baked right into it. In this section of our demo, we're beginning at an empty dashboard because we've just created the account and nothing's yet been deployed. What we will be exploring is how a developer gets their code deployed using Bloom. We will be deploying a WordPress instance. So in order to begin, we'll need either CloudFormation or Terraform infrastructure as code, and one or more Docker containers. These can either be self-hosted or in Docker Hub. We'll also need the credentials to access those containers. So the first thing we do is name our application. Now, Bloom is focused today on CD for our customers with plans for continuous integration in the future. So we have the option to choose CloudFormation or Terraform, two popular IAC tools. We'll be using CloudFormation. The next step here is to connect to our code repository. For the demo, we'll be using GitHub, which is a pretty popular one. This uses a secure connection so that Bloom can begin looking into the repository and reading files securely. So the venture can indicate that they just want a specific repository to be able to be read. So after that connection has been set up, the next step is to select the base application infrastructure file. This can also take a folder containing the Terraform files. I do have a config parameter that I need to use, so I will enter that after selecting the infrastructure file. Now this looks right to me, so I will confirm and initiate the creation of the pipeline that will run when it's time to deploy. This kicks off an initial release that I can view the logs for. I'm going to go ahead and continue application creation. The next step, I'm asked whether I want to migrate my database schema or not. For this particular application, that's not needed, but it is something that Bloom supports. The next step is to add our service. So part of defining a service is selecting or creating a connection to Docker so that the pipeline can automate pushing the container image. This can be set up with either Docker Hub or a privately hosted Docker registry. So I'm going to enter those credentials here. Once that connection has been added, I will also indicate the namespace and repository for the Docker image. And then lastly, I will select the infrastructure file for this service. So adding a service adds a stage to our application's pipeline. This enables the base app as well as the services to be continuously managed and deployed moving forward. Any future updates to this image or the infrastructure files will cause the pipeline to run again. So we are now ready to deploy. Deploying with Bloom makes a difference because security and compliance are really baked in every step of the way. So now that we've got that all deployed, we're going to be looking at the CTO persona. For this, we'll go to the venture dashboard in a venture with a few applications deployed. So there are a wide variety of vulnerabilities and configuration issues that can make an app insecure at the infrastructure level or at the application level. So looking at our first donut here, our dev donut, this gives us an idea at the environment level what kind of vulnerabilities we're looking at. We want to take a closer look at the vulnerabilities specific to our application we just deployed. So we're going to go ahead and find our application. Here we can see the severity level for these vulnerabilities. We're going to dive in a bit deeper and get some details about this specific vulnerability. So going back to the application dashboard, here is also where you can see any outputs that have been defined. You can see the status of all the services that are running, as well as outputs that were defined for those specific services. For the WordPress app we deployed, one of our outputs here is the URL that we actually need to access it. If we go to that URL, we're in. So next we'll look at our sec donut. This shows at the infrastructure level for the environment what compliance looks like. So this is taking bank grade security and codifying them so that any venture running on Bloom can have that level of security and develop at velocity. We're going to dive in and look at some common policy violations that have been implicated actually in some real world breaches. As an example, this app has a couple of big issues. It has an S3 bucket with public access enabled, and that same S3 bucket is also not encrypted. So as a developer, if I can see that this is currently violating the policy controls and I go in and fix that in the code base, the pipeline that was provisioned earlier will enable Bloom to automatically detect that change and deploy it to Sandbox. So that's where the continuous deployment really comes into play. Something that's on our roadmap in the future is to auto-remediate some of these policy violations. Now the last donut we'll be looking at is the ops donut. This shows our cloud utilization against our remaining budget. In the future, we have plans to greatly expand this functionality. For instance, giving a view into things like velocity of code pushes or the time frame between manual remediations. In summary, deploying with Bloom makes a difference because security and compliance are really baked in at every step.
Hi, my name is Aditya Jayanti. I manage technology and security at Bloom. Before we can assess what bank-grade security means, let us first define what is cybersecurity and compliance. It is easier to start with what it is not. It is not a set of technical controls. It is not a point-in-time proof of existence of controls, processes, or resources. It is definitely not a compliance checklist on some Excel. Cybersecurity is a framework through which an organization performs a threat-based risk assessment to identify the threats and the risks that are relevant to them, and based on that, develops a set of controls and processes that are enforced continuously in order to manage their cybersecurity posture under the risk thresholds that they have defined. Cybersecurity is not a silver bullet technology. Cybersecurity is not one big solution. It is doing the many small things whilst adapting to new and emerging threats. Cybersecurity is context specific. Cyber threats faced by various organizations are different. A bank might face a threat of money laundering, whereas a non-financial institution might not. And the threats and cybersecurity requirements also differ by applications. An application holding personally identifiable information of your customers or credit card information requires a higher level of security compared to the one that does not. Cybersecurity is the imperative of every company, whether you're operating in a regulated industry or not. The responsibility for ensuring regulatory compliance rests with the company that is providing the applicable services to the end user in that jurisdiction. This means that a company that is operating in multiple countries that fall under very different regulators has to demonstrate compliance to each of those regulators individually. Regulatory compliance requires not only the implementation of the controls, but also the observability, verifiability, and evidencing of those controls to that regulator. Cyber threat actors do not really care about the size of your company. The cyber threats are faced by organizations, be it large enterprises or even startups. Stay tuned for more from Bloom team.
Today, I want to share the story of LetsBloom and why me and my team have invested over 2 years building this proposition. While working at Standard Chartered Bank, I've observed the challenges that regulated entities face when building, testing, and deploying cloud-based applications. The whole process is very complex, it is slow, and it is expensive. Fintech partners and independent software vendors, especially those selling into regulated entities, are facing similar challenges as well. Now let's imagine there are two teams, Team A and Team B in a bank trying to build a new financial experience to launch to their clients. They have identified the fintech partners that they believe have some of the capabilities they need, and they've even identified a client that is willing to co-create and buy these newly minted services. Both teams are excited about the art of the possible. Team A decides to go the traditional route and goes through a lengthy infrastructure and vendor onboarding process. This process requires them to answer many questions about the vendor's legal entity, about the vendor's resources, and the vendor's tech stack. They also need to answer security and compliance related questions. It takes them about 4 months to get all the approvals in place to start working with this fintech on the POC itself. If the POC is successful, they will go through a similar drill again. Well, if during these 4 months, any security or compliance requirements would have changed, because this is not a static space, this is ever evolving and it is complex, they would have had to go through this entire process again. Team B, on the other hand, decides to use the LetsBloom platform, and they get an instant cloud account with pre-built bank-grade security and compliance controls. They simply send an invite to the fintech vendor, and the fintech vendor accepts the invite and securely onboards their application onto the LetsBloom platform. Team B gets instant observability over the security and compliance posture. They do not need to figure out what questions need to be asked. They get dashboards that they can access, and they get reports that can be instantly shared with various stakeholders in their organization, be it the risk and compliance teams, be it solution architects, be it cybersecurity teams. They get a head start of about 4 months at a fraction of the cost. If you operate in a regulated industry, are on a cloud adoption journey, or want to create better experiences for your clients, I welcome you to try the LetsBloom platform and marketplace.